What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here to react to more of your comments on YouTube. Once again, you guys have been absolute rock stars, getting involved with all the videos so far over the last week, getting your comments in. So we have picked out the best ones to react to. So let's get straight into it.
First one I'm going to be reacting to is Martin Walton 9307. He says, there's a weird Jonathan David bias on this channel based on 3 poor performances in the World Cup. Whilst I also had doubts over him as a 50 to 60 million pound player, because I think he has certain physical and technical limitations that will stop him being a truly elite player, he's a real bargain in the 25 to 30 million bracket. Consistent goal scorer in Belgium and France, 2-footed, excellent finisher, and thrives on cutbacks and fast crosses drilled into the box. He's a definite upgrade on Richarlison IMO.
I get what he's saying about the bias against Jonathan David on this channel, because after the World Cup, because we were all so excited to see him at the World Cup, and then he had those poor performances, and then I think we were a tiny bit, I wouldn't say negative, but giving him the criticism that he deserved after the World Cup. We were linked with him for a big money move. We didn't want it. But I think ever since we've been linked with him this summer and those prices have been bandied about, I think we have looked at it a lot more positive, and we've both said we'd like to see him at the club.
I think we're pretty much in alignment with what Martin thinks. He said he had doubts about him in the 50-60 million bracket, as we did, but moving him to the 25 to 30 million bracket, he's a bargain, and we kind of feel the same. As we've said previously on updates, players of with his track record and his ability don't come around for that kind of price so often.
Exactly.
And we said that for that money, we'll probably be quite positive about this deal.
Yeah, and I think when you're judging the out-and-out player, I don't think it's a definite upgrade on Richarlison, like you've said a couple of times, but what I do think he's a better fit for the system. I believe that, and I think he would potentially get more goals in the system, so that is why I say I would get rid of Richarlison to bring in a Jonathan David.
When he says here he's an excellent finisher, thrives on cutbacks and fast crosses, which is actually really important in our system, because that's a lot of the time we create chances. And that is actually one of Richarlison's biggest assets. He's actually quite good at finishing those chances, as he's proven last season. But I think what David offers instead ahead of Richarlison is, I feel like he's more of a threat in behind as well, where Richarlison, he's not slow, but he doesn't have that real speed that I think David definitely offers behind as well, on top of that. Lewis Underwood 5248, he says, the best Spurs can do is be like Brighton and Palace and a few other Prem sides in how they operate in the transfer market, because we are never going to sign the Mbappes or a Kane or a Bale for that matter. We have to discover them in the first place. But one advantage we have over those clubs mentioned above is that we are not forced to sell like they are. How many good players have Brighton had to sell over the years? You don't want to be buying players from Palace, Brighton, Brentford, Leicester, because they are just going to clobber you for money. You have to compete with them for talent and get in the first place. In another pod, Sim mentioned a player Brighton are scouting, and they have a brilliant scouting team. We should be looking at that player too. In my view, that is where we are right now. I think we have missed the boat with Eze and even Tony, and we should move on. So obviously Tottenham fans, they like statement signings, big money signings. We want signings that obviously we feel are going to close the gap to the top 3. But he's suggesting, instead of doing that, if we're operating a smarter way, and we operate like a Brighton or a Palace in terms of the recruitment, but instead of how they operate, which is they buy to sell, we buy and we can keep them.
I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying, but I would like us to take it up a notch to the Brighton and the Palaces. I do like the kind of signings that they make, and I do think we make signings in the similar mould. When you look at Destiny Udogie, you look at Pape Matar Sarr, those are kind of the mould of the signings that Brighton and Crystal Palace do make. But also we make signings in the mould of Cuti Romero, Mickey van de Ven, players a bit higher up the food chain. So I think that the way that we're doing our transfers over the past couple of years is definitely a step in the right direction. I would just like to see us evolve that even more now and go for talents ready-made like an Eberechi Eze, but also competing for the talents that Brighton and Crystal Palace are going for as well. So I think it needs to be a bit of both.
Yeah, I think what Lewis is saying is probably right, in terms of, not completely right, I think there's some truth to it, where we do have to be a bit smarter in the market than some other teams who can spend bigger money, albeit we should have the finances to go big on a few players. But I think that's what we have been trying to do, I think, and we just haven't done it very well over the past 2 years. And it's meant that because we haven't, like, for example, under Poch, we tried to do that quite a lot. We had some success, but we also had some failures. And I think if we had better scouting departments back then maybe we would be in a better position right now than we are.
Yeah, look, the reality is, over the last couple of years, we've brought in Richarlison for over 60 million. We've brought in Brennan Johnson for about 50 million. And I think for those prices that we've paid for Brennan Johnson and for Richarlison, don't get me wrong, I like Brennan Johnson, I like Richarlison, but for that money, I feel like we can get such better quality.
Yeah, and if you would have, back in when Eze and Olise were in championship, spend that money then and get it right, then all of a sudden you won't have to spend that big money on a Brennan or a Richarlison.
Yeah, but look, they're talking about the same fee pretty much for what we paid for Richarlison for Eze right now.
And in that context, it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is user NQ1YO21G6E. That's a bit of a mouthful. He says, I'm from Poland and Shimansky is a good player, but unfortunately cannot deal with the pressure and his physicality isn't the best. He usually starts for Poland, but he had a very poor start against Holland. That is why he didn't play against Austria. I'm excited to see him in a Spurs shirt, but only because he's from my country. Come on, you Spurs. Big up to you, mate. Yeah, Shimansky is a player we've talked about, we mentioned, as he's done really well in Turkey, a player that's been linked to Tottenham, but he's suggesting doesn't have the physicality for the Premier League.
Well, that worries me, obviously, because he's seen him a lot closer than we have for being a Polish national. And having said that, I'm not going to go on gospel completely what he's saying and make a decision on the back of that, but I still feel like we need to be aiming our sights a bit higher than Shimansky. He's only done it in the Turkish league. We watched him in Poland's third game. I don't think he was anything to write home about in that game either. So I'll take him maybe as like a fourth or fifth choice, but I think like we need to be looking at other better targets before him.
Yeah, look, it's good to hear from a Poland fan who's watching regularly, and if he's saying he does struggle with physicality, that's a main thing that I think we need in this Postecoglou team. So maybe that would pour cold water on that potential deal. Shot skis says Ange's Aussie nepotism strikes again. First, he brought in his former captain on the field in Jedinak, who had Soddle experience. Now he brings in Nick Monti and his assistant from CCM, which is the coast of, what I can't remember the name is.
Coast Mariners.
Coast Mariners. Look, Nick was a great coach at league level, but he was a failure even at Hibernian level. Big Ange is at the wheel, mate. These two will just be more yes men to Ange, as is Jedinak, as they would never otherwise see themselves at this level of coaching at this point in their careers, or perhaps even ever, really.
I think that's very unfair.
Ange is he never? Does he have a bias against?
I think he does.
Coaches who've coached in Australia.
I think he does have a bias towards Australian coaches, but I don't think he's going to bring in coaches that are not equipped to do the job. I think he's going to bring in coaches because he believes they're the right fit for this football club. He believes they're the right men for the job, and he believes that they can succeed in this job. Yeah, he might favour coaches from Australia, but if there was no good coaches there, or if he didn't believe they could do the job, he would be looking outside of Australia.
Yeah, and also Shotskis is kind of implying because they're Australian, they're no good, and that's where people have kind of had that bias against Ange previously, because he's done so well, but because he's like an Aussie, he hasn't done it like in top leagues, people have turned their nose up at him.
And don't discredit the job that they did at Coast Mariners, because that job was an unbelievable job. To win the league with the team with the lowest budget in the league, no matter what league you're in, is going to be an incredibly hard job. And they did that. They won the league. Yes, it didn't go right for them at Hibs, but you've seen big managers from around the world where sometimes it's just not the right fit at a certain football club, and it hasn't gotten right. So I believe there were a lot of problems at Hibs, and they did push the button apparently a bit too early on the sacking of him. So maybe if he got more time, he could have done a good job in the end, but he wasn't given the time.
Well, the next two comments go in that favour as well, talking about the coaches. GL208 says, Gents, Montgomery played defensive midfield for Sheffield United for many years, coached Central Coast Mariners to an A-League title using a very good and style system, and made very smart recruitment choices. He is switched on. Hibs were just impatient.
Well, there you go.
And the next one as well says, Anton Tagliaferro 6532 says, Monty and Sergio are brilliant coaches and especially fantastic at youth development. Monty was a player for Sheffield United for 12 years before arriving to Australia before moving to Australia as a player before getting into a coach, while Sergio is Portuguese and worked as a coach for clubs such as Benfica. So I think two really positive things there. First of all, what GL's saying is that Montgomery used an Ange-style system for the Mariners. That obviously do really well. Translate that for us. And Anton saying that they're really great at youth development, and that's obviously something with our current golden generation supposedly of youth players. That's going to be really vital if we're going to help them develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, I mean, I didn't know much about them before they were linked, and then obviously the next day it was confirmed by the club, but I didn't know much about them. But after reading more about them, I've fully bought in, to be honest. And I think that when you're looking at Aussie sportsmen, they're very kind of serious, down to earth, take no shit, and I feel like the players that we got now will resonate with that, and I think they can do a really good job here. Ange has clearly handpicked these guys because, like I said before, because he thinks they can do a job at this football club, and I'm going to back it. And then, you know, a lot of people's opinions about Ange Postecoglou were like this before he joined the club, and as soon as he was brought in by the club, he started making the right noises, started playing the right football, and everyone got on board. So I think it might be similar with these guys.
Next one is Vito Danu 5846. He says, if we don't get Eze, the fan advisory board should not be cooperating with Levy anymore. Levy is not passionate about football. He just cares about the club being a good portfolio for shareholders. We need a chairman / CEO who is passionate about football. That is my opinion. Come on, you Spurs. Vito is saying that is either Eze or the fan advisory board start kicking up a fuss.
Is the fan advisory board even still a thing?
Isn't it?
I don't know. I haven't heard about it for ages. But I think maybe fans should get a bit angry about it if we don't bring in Eze, because we see he's clearly there for the taking. I think he would like a move to Spurs.
If we lost him to like a City or an Arsenal, is it really our fault?
Yeah, but if we lost him because of the way we structure a deal and because we won't put in that bid that Crystal Palace want, then yes. If it's because of he just favours a move to them two over us, then fair enough. There's nothing you can do. But if it's because of our old tricks and we want to do the deal over 20,000 years and we won't put the money that Palace want up front, then yeah, you can criticise the board.
But should they stop talking to Levy if that happens?
I don't know about that. That's up to them to make a decision on that. I'm not going to tell them or advise them what to do. They're their own people.
Daniel Hewson 8866 says, the only advantage Ramsey has over Lo Celso is his energy and work rate. Technically, he's nowhere near as good, yet at least. Some people get frustrated with Lo Celso's kind of languid approach to his play. I don't. I'd rather keep Gio than exchange him for Ramsey. This is a point I was kind of making. I kind of agree with him, albeit Ramsey is available a lot more, albeit he had a big injury last season, which kept him out for quite a while. But I do feel like I don't think Ramsey, from a player's perspective, is a massive upgrade on Lo Celso.
I get what you're saying. I think he did stagnate a bit last year because of the injury, and it didn't go right for him. The year before, every time he came on the pitch for Aston Villa, I loved what I saw, to be honest. And I feel like Lo Celso, we ain't keeping Lo Celso regardless of Ramsey or not. So let's just get that out there. So whatever happens, we're bringing in someone in that position. We have to. If we bring in a Ramsey, in my opinion, I feel like we could be getting Ramsey at a really good time. And I feel like in the next couple of years, he could go up levels and levels. I really believe in his ability. I've loved what I've seen from him in the past. It just didn't go right for him last year. So now, because it didn't go right for him last year, I believe that if we can bring him in, a coach like Ange Postecoglou, who's a good man manager, can really get him back on track and back to that upward trajectory which he was showing a couple of years ago.
Yeah, if we bring him in, I'd like him to be seen as purely as midfielder. I don't want us to bring him in and then don't get a forward player because Ramsey can play in the forward line. I don't want that to be the case. I want him to be seen as like a alternative to Gallagher rather than as an alternative to Eze.
I agree.
That's what I'd like to see.
They were saying, Tom Allnut was saying last night on his report from the Times, he was saying that we're going to be going for Eze regardless of what happens with Jacob Ramsey. So he didn't say that we're going to bring in both, but he said we could bring in both.
Okay, that'll be good. Daniel Howson again says, I'll definitely be a proponent of a back five with Kuti in the middle, Radu on the right, And while with Romero supporting a DM, doubling up on occasion, and Van de Ven sweeping, our two fullbacks, inverted wingbacks, can still maraud forward in that system, and we wouldn't lose too much attacking threat, as it would allow Kuti to get forward, which he loves to do anyway. So a 3 at the back with no real number 6, it seems, because he was playing a 3-4-3, but with Kuti doubling up with a potential DM.
So who would be the 2 CMs in that?
It would probably be like Maddison and Sarr, I guess.
Maddison and Sarr. Is that enough defensive stability in the middle?
Sometimes Sarr and then Romero could step in, sometimes doubling up with Sarr. I don't know.
I do like that as an idea. However, I feel like this is what annoys me about this football club, right? You bring in Mourinho, you've got the best attackers, you've got the worst defenders. You bring in Conte, it's very similar. You've got really good attackers, worst defenders. You bring in Ange, you've got terrible attackers or not as good as attackers, and then a really good defence. I mean, it just never matches up, does it? Like, you bring in defensive coaches, you've got a good attack. You bring in an attacking manager, you've got the best defence. Like, why can't we just have like what's tailored for each manager? Like, when we have defensive managers in, have a really good defence. When we have an attacking manager in, get really good attack as well. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But in terms of this 3-5-2 that he's talking about, or 3-4-3, whichever one you want to go for, I think it could work. But I just feel like if we had these defenders in that Conte system, we would have been unstoppable.
Yeah, I think Conte would have had a much better chance of success if we had this back 5. Under Conte. I think it would have worked great under Conte.
But I don't know how it works under Ange, because obviously he likes to play his inverted fullbacks. How does it work a 3-4-3 with inverted fullbacks?
Yeah, he would have to, I think, 3-4-3, the fullbacks invert, potentially one of the defenders comes into midfield.
Van de Ven and Dragoshin go out wide a little bit to defend from the flanks.
Kind of. And then Romero could step in potentially occasionally, and then you still have those players out wide, but then how many do you have enough players in the centre up front?
Have we ever seen a system where someone plays wing-back system, 5 at the back, 3 centre-backs, but the wing-backs invert? So I don't think I've ever seen that. Every time someone plays 3-5-2, it's always the wing-backs like tugged very high or wide and go.
Well, that's
down
usually the
flanks.
Point of playing wing-backs. Is
Yeah,
they
exactly.
provide the width.
Exactly.
And then you play the forwards up front as an inside forwards. That's usually the reason to do it. That's why you add an extra defender.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see how he would work that out if we were to go to a back 3. He has done it before, apparently, played a back 3. So
I do think we've got the players to do it, though. I do think so. We've got the 3 top centre-backs in 3 positions that I think will be comfortable there. We've got the wing-backs in Doggy and Porro who've done that role before. So I think we could do it.
It's about finding that balance in midfield.
I think with James Maddison, he might even be one of the left forward in that role, because it'll be very tucked in the middle, wouldn't it? Or it could be Son, obviously. Son could do it as well.
If he's tucked in, I think, you put Maddison there.
So what? Son is the number 9.
Kulusevski with Son.
I think those players are perfect for that kind of system.
With a Bentancur and Sarr potentially.
I think it's perfect.
Could work. Jack1906 says, why don't Spurs go for Ugarte? He's an excellent number 6. He's also Uruguayan, so Bentancur can help him settle in. He was brilliant for Sporting, but hasn't settled at PSG, and they seem to be willing to sell him.
I'd be up for that. I'd be really up for that. I think he's performing really well at the Copa at the moment for Uruguay. In their first 2 games, they've smashed both teams that they've played. He's been a central cog in that centre of the midfield alongside Valverde. And I loved him at Sporting. I remember watching the game against Arsenal, and he was just unbelievable that day. Very aggressive. He doesn't take any shit. Yeah, I think he would be a really good number 6 for us.
I wonder what hasn't worked at PSG.
Yeah.
That's that far.
Sometimes it doesn't work for a lot of players at PSG. A lot of people.
There's quite a high turnover of players at PSG usually. I really liked him. I really wanted him at Spurs when Sporting was selling him. Unfortunately, we didn't make it happen at that time. But I think he would be a really interesting option if Tottenham were to pip. If PSG are really willing to sell and not willing to keep him for another year, I think Spurs should definitely be interested in that, and I think he could really fill out that role in the number 6.
And I think it's a project that he could really buy into. He's still young, 23 years of age, and to come here and get your career back on track in the Premier League under Ange Postecoglou and being that kind of marquee signing in the 6, I think it could work.
Bimoski217 says, I've accepted that we are just like any other mid-team. Nothing interesting in our football as well as the transfer business. The difference between us and Bournemouth is that we think we are a big team, but we've got nothing to back it up. Our chase for silverware is like a hamster on a wheel. Big team, Big Six team, joke of the century. Tottenham is like an agricultural business set up in a desert.
I understand what he's trying to say, but I think he's just gone a bit over the top on this one. A bit over the top. When you look at the last 10 years, how many times have we actually finished outside the top 6? What, 2?
Once under Mourinho, once under Conte.
Yeah, so 2. And there you have it. If we've only finished twice outside the top 6 in the last 10 years, how many times have Chelsea finished outside the top 6 in the last 10 years?
You probably even extend that the last 20 years.
Last 20 years.
It's probably
then.
4 years. It's probably 4 times.
So that proves we're a top 6 team, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean if we're going by league position, it does. I guess it depends how you judge what a top 6 team is. If you're going by trophies, we're probably not.
Yeah, when you're going by trophies, obviously, but I think when you're also going by transfer spend, let's say over the last 5 years, we're also a top 6 team, maybe even a top 4 team.
But when he says, he's implying we're only as big as Bournemouth. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Completely over the top.
Come on, we're a much bigger club than Bournemouth. Not only the stadium, like the fan base is so big. It's one of the biggest in Europe at the moment. Look how much money we bring in as well. That obviously goes into it when you're talking about a big club, how much they're able to generate. That only the big clubs are able to generate those kind of revenues. Obviously, we've been in the top 6 for the last 20 years very consistently. I think we are much bigger than... I know we don't have the trophies in recent history, but we're, in terms of history of trophies, we're the sixth or seventh most in the whole of England.
Up there, yeah.
So I know the trophy cabinet has been a bit bare in recent years, but people forget that Tottenham have a lot of major trophies compared to most of every team in England. So, come on, I understand the frustration, but we need to keep grounded here and see the bigger picture.
Yeah. The reality is the number of times Spurs have finished in the top 6 in the 20 years is probably like triple of what Bournemouth have been in the Premier League seasons. Bournemouth have been in the Premier League.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Belgian Hotspur says the difficult deal to do narrative is just a way of saying that Levy won't pay the price.
100%.
If Levy doesn't back Ange, I could seriously see Ange walking. He does not come across as someone who will take any BS. Could you see a potential Ange blow up in March a la Conte?
Not really. I think that Ange Postecoglou is a man that regardless of what Levy's going to do, he's going to back himself to get it right. He loves the kind of... when you set a hard task in front of him, I feel like he wants to conquer it, no matter what the surroundings are. So I feel like Ange will be here until he gets the job done or he gets sacked. Yeah,
I can't see him walking out. Look, could he be a manager that gets frustrated? Maybe, but I also see him as a manager who does make excuses. And whereas Mourinho and Conte constantly making excuses, Ange seems a guy who's going to take it on himself, take responsibility. So. Yeah, I don't see him walking out, but I can see him maybe getting frustrated with the situation.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's it.
All right. Well, those are the comments that we picked to react. Obviously, we'll do another episode next week, so get your comments in the comment section for the next videos over the next week. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.